The rope burned skin around her wrists stung as the chains rattled with her every movement. Delia Greene kept her chin high despite the jeering crowd that had gathered for the auction block in Jerome Junction, Arizona Territory, 1878. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her head, but it wasn't nearly as scorching as her rage at the injustice that had brought her to this moment. "Next up, gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying over the dusty town square. "A fine young woman, strong back, educated too. Perfect for whatever work you might need." He winked suggestively, causing raucous laughter to ripple through the crowd of men. Delia fought back tears of humiliation. 3 weeks ago, she had been a schoolteacher in Boston. Now, she was being sold like cattle after the stagecoach robbery that had left her the lone survivor, accused of being an accomplice to the bandits who had murdered her fellow passengers. With no family in the territory and no money for proper legal representation, she had been railroaded by a corrupt judge who had sentenced her to debt servitude to pay for her supposed crimes. The bidding started, numbers being called out that represented years of her life to be stolen. Delia scanned the crowd desperately, seeing nothing but hostile or lustful faces, until her eyes locked with his. He stood at the back, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hat pulled low over his face, but she could see the intensity in his eyes, blue as the Arizona sky and fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. Unlike the others, he didn't leer or sneer. He simply watched, his jaw set in a hard line. "Do I hear $50?" the auctioneer called. "50 for this fine specimen." The bids climbed steadily. 60, 75. $100 from the saloon owner who was known to employ women in ways that made decent folk cross the street to avoid his establishment. 150, called a gruff voice from the crowd. 200, countered the saloon owner with a yellow-toothed grin. $500, came a new voice, deep and steady. The crowd fell silent, turning to see who had made such an extravagant bid. The man with the blue eyes stepped forward, and for the first time, Delia could see his face clearly, strong features framed by dark brown hair, a straight nose, and a mouth set in determination. Well, the auctioneer said, clearly surprised. 500 from Mr. Nathaniel O'Rourke. "Do I hear any other bids?" The saloon owner cursed but shook his head. No one else spoke up. "Sold." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to seal Delia's fate. Nathaniel O'Rourke approached the platform, ignoring the mutters from the dispersing crowd. He handed a pouch to the auctioneer, who quickly counted the money before nodding in satisfaction. "She's all yours, O'Rourke, though I didn't take you for the type to need to buy company." The auctioneer laughed crudely. Nathaniel didn't respond. Instead, he looked directly at Delia, his expression softening just slightly. Then, in one swift movement that shocked everyone present, he reached for her chains with a small tool from his pocket. "What do you think you're doing?" The auctioneer demanded, but stepped back when Nathaniel shot him a warning glance. The lock clicked open, and the heavy chains fell away from Delia's wrists. She stared in disbelief as Nathaniel removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders. "This ends now," he said quietly, for her ears alone. Then, before she could process what was happening, he bent down and swept her into his arms. "Put her down, O'Rourke," the sheriff called from the edge of the square. "That woman's legally bound to service." "She's coming with me, Sheriff Wilson," Nathaniel replied, his voice level but unyielding. "And I suggest you remember who actually keeps the peace in this territory before you try to stop me." There was something in his tone that made the sheriff hesitate. Whispers rippled through the remaining onlookers. Delia heard fragments: Rangers, war hero, wouldn't cross him. "This isn't right," the sheriff protested, but made no move to intervene as Nathaniel carried Delia through the parting crowd toward a chestnut horse tethered nearby. "Hold on," he murmured as he lifted her onto the saddle, then mounted behind her. With a click of his tongue and a gentle nudge of his heels, the horse moved forward, carrying them away from the town square. Delia sat rigid in front of him, her mind racing. Was she being rescued or merely transferred from one captor to another? She didn't know this man, had no reason to trust him, yet something in her responded to the solid strength of him at her back. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked when they had left the town behind. "Somewhere safe," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. You'll be free to leave whenever you wish, but I thought you might want a chance to recover before deciding your next move." Delia twisted to look at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." His blue eyes met hers steadily. "I know enough. I know you're innocent. How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've been tracking the Gibson gang for months. They're the ones who robbed your stagecoach. I know their methods. They always leave a survivor to take the blame." His jaw tightened. "Usually a woman traveling alone, someone without connections who can be easily railroaded by corrupt officials, who find it easier to close a case with a convenient suspect than to pursue dangerous outlaws." Delia felt tears threatening again, but this time from relief at being believed. She had almost given up hope that anyone would. "Then why didn't you speak up at my trial?" she demanded, anger flaring despite her gratitude. "I wasn't in town," he said simply. "I was still on the gang's trail. By the time I returned to Jerome Junction, you'd already been sentenced. The auction was my first chance to intervene." She fell silent, processing this information as the horse carried them steadily northward across the rugged landscape. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and copper. "What will happen now?" she finally asked. "That depends on you," Nathaniel replied. "But first, let's tend to those wrists." Delia looked down at her raw, bleeding skin where the chains had rubbed. In the rush of events, she had almost forgotten the pain. "I have supplies at the ranch," he continued. "Food, clean water, medicine. You can rest, heal, then decide what you want to do next. I have connections in Prescott who might be able to officially clear your name." "And what do you want in return?" she asked bluntly. No man did something for nothing, especially for a woman in her position. She felt him stiffen slightly behind her. "Nothing," he said, his voice harder. "Contrary to what most of those men back there might think, Miss Greene, not every man sees women as property to be bought and used." Delia fell silent, chastened but still wary. She had learned the hard way not to trust too easily. For now, she would accept his help, but she would remain vigilant. The ride continued in silence as the desert landscape rolled past them. Delia found herself gradually relaxing against Nathaniel's chest, the exhaustion of weeks of terror and mistreatment catching up with her. Despite her determination to stay alert, she found her eyelids growing heavy. "Rest," his deep voice rumbled behind her. "You're safe now." Against all reason, she believed him. As the rhythmic motion of the horse lulled her, Delia allowed herself to slip into the first peaceful sleep she'd had since the nightmare began. When Delia awoke, the world around her had transformed. Gone was the harsh glare of the afternoon sun. In its place, the soft glow of twilight bathed the landscape in purple shadows. They were climbing a gentle slope, the terrain changing from open desert to rolling grassland, dotted with juniper trees and prickly pear cacti. "You're awake," Nathaniel observed, his voice close to her ear. "We're almost there." Delia straightened, embarrassed to realize she had been leaning fully against him, her head resting on his chest. "I apologize for no need," he interrupted gently. "You needed the rest." As they crested the hill, a sprawling ranch came into view. A main house of sturdy logs and stone stood proudly against the darkening sky, with several outbuildings, a barn, bunkhouse, and what looked like a workshop arranged around a central yard. A creek glimmered in the distance, lined with cottonwood trees that provided a welcome splash of green in the arid landscape. "Is this all yours?" Delia asked, unable to hide her surprise. It was considerably more impressive than she had expected. "The Diamond and Ranch," Nathaniel confirmed with a hint of pride in his voice. "Built it from nothing over the last 5 years." As they approached, a middle-aged woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her weathered face broke into a warm smile at the sight of them. "Rosa," Nathaniel called out as he guided the horse to a halt before the porch. "We have a guest who will be staying with us for a while." Rosa's sharp eyes took in Delia's appearance, the borrowed coat, the raw wrists, the pallor of exhaustion, and her expression changed to one of motherly concern. "Dios mío," she murmured, hurrying down the steps. Come inside, pobrecita." Nathaniel dismounted first, then reached up to help Delia down. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, stiff from the long ride and weak from weeks of inadequate food and rest. He caught her by the elbows, steadying her until she found her balance. "Thank you," she said quietly, conscious of Rosa watching them with knowing eyes. "Rosa Mendez is my housekeeper and the best cook in the Arizona Territory," Nathaniel explained as they walked toward the house. "She came with me from Texas and has kept me alive and well-fed ever since." "He would eat nothing but beans and jerky without me," Rosa declared, leading the way into the house. "And the house would be fit only for coyotes." The interior of the ranch house was unexpectedly welcoming. Polished wooden floors gleamed in the light of oil lamps. Comfortable furniture was arranged around a large stone fireplace, and colorful woven blankets added warmth to the walls. The smell of something delicious meat and spices filled the air. "First, a bath," Rosa announced decisively, looking Delia up and down. "Then food, then rest. Tomorrow is soon enough for questions and explanations." Delia opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The thought of being clean was too tempting to resist. "I'll see to the horse," Nathaniel said, already turning toward the door. "Rosa will take good care of you, Miss Greene." "Delia," she said impulsively. "Please call me Delia." He paused, looking back at her with those intense blue eyes. "Delia," he repeated softly, as if testing how her name felt on his lips. "I'm Nathaniel, or Nate, to most folks around here." With a slight nod, he was gone, leaving Delia alone with Rosa, who was already bustling toward what appeared to be a kitchen at the back of the house. Come," the older woman called. "Water is already heating on the stove. We will have you clean and comfortable in no time." True to her word, within half an hour Rosa had prepared a bath in a private room off the kitchen. The large copper tub was filled with steaming water, scented with something floral that Delia couldn't identify. Rosa had also produced a clean nightgown and robe, laid out on a nearby chair along with a towel and a bar of soap. "These belonged to Senor Nate's sister when she visited last summer," Rosa explained. "She is about your size, I think." "I didn't know he had a sister," Delia said, suddenly realizing how little she knew about the man who had bought her freedom. Rebecca. "She lives in San Francisco now, married to a banker." Rosa shook her head with a smile. "She visits once a year and spends the whole time trying to convince her brother to move to civilization." Rosa helped Delia undress, clucking sympathetically at the sight of her thin frame and the bruises that marked her arms and back. "Dios mío," she murmured again. "What animals did this to you? The sheriff and his deputies." Delia replied quietly. They weren't gentle with their criminal. Rosa's eyes flashed with anger. Sheriff Wilson is a dog. Everyone knows it. She helped Delia into the tub. Soak as long as you wish. I will bring salve for those wrists and a good meal when you are ready. Left alone, Delia sank deeper into the hot water, allowing it to soothe her aching muscles and wash away weeks of grime and fear. As she scrubbed her skin and hair, she found herself thinking about Nathaniel O'Rourke. Who was this man who had spent a small fortune to free a stranger? A rancher, clearly successful. Rosa had mentioned Texas, and the townspeople had whispered something about rangers. By the time she emerged from the bath, dressed in the borrowed nightgown and robe, Delia felt more human than she had in weeks. Rosa was waiting with a tray of food, a fragrant stew of beef and chilies, fresh bread, and a cup of strong coffee. "Eat," she instructed, setting the tray on a small table near a window. "Then I will tend to your wrists." Delia obeyed, finding herself ravenous once the first bite passed her lips. As she ate, Rosa worked, gently applying a cool, soothing salve to her raw wrists before wrapping them in clean bandages. "Where did you learn to do this?" Delia asked, watching the woman's deft movements. "My mother was a curandera, a healer in our village in Mexico," Rosa replied. "I learned many things from her before coming north." When the meal was finished and her wrists bandaged, Rosa led Delia to a bedroom on the second floor of the house. It was simply but comfortably furnished, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a small writing desk beneath a window that would surely offer a beautiful view of the ranch by daylight. "Rest now," Rosa said, turning down the lamp until it cast only a soft glow. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." Exhausted despite her earlier nap, Delia sank onto the bed. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything." The older woman paused at the door, her expression softening. "It is Señor Nate you should thank. In all my years with him, I have never seen him bring home a woman before." With that cryptic comment and a knowing smile, she closed the door behind her. Delia lay back against the pillows, her mind swirling with questions. What had brought Nathaniel O'Rourke to that auction? What did he really want from her? And why did the thought of him make her heart beat just a little faster? Despite all her well-founded wariness of men, sleep claimed her before she could find answers, drawing her into the first peaceful dreams she'd had in a very long time. Morning came with the gentle sounds of a working ranch rooster's crowing, cattle lowing in the distance, the rhythmic chop of an axe splitting wood. Delia opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating a room that was even more charming by day than it had been by lamplight. For a moment she lay still, savoring the comfort of the bed and the sense of safety that had eluded her for so long. Then, aware that she couldn't hide in this room forever, she rose and went to the window. The view took her breath away. The ranch spread out before her, fenced pastures where cattle grazed, the barn and corrals where men were already at work, and beyond it all, the majestic sweep of mountains that framed the property. In the clear morning light, the landscape was painted in vibrant hues of gold, russet, and green, so different from the gray cityscape of Boston she had known all her life. A movement caught her eye. Nathaniel was in the yard below, splitting logs with powerful strokes of an axe. He had removed his shirt in deference to the already warming day, and Delia found herself unable to look away from the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he worked. As if sensing her gaze, he paused and looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and Delia felt heat rise to her cheeks at being caught staring. Nathaniel gave a slight nod of acknowledgement before returning to his task. Embarrassed, Delia stepped back from the window. She found that Rosa had already been in the room while she slept, leaving a simple but well-made dress of blue cotton on the chair by the desk. It was a bit large for her frame, but with the aid of the belt provided, she managed to make it presentable. There were even fresh stockings and a pair of practical leather shoes that fit reasonably well. After dressing and braiding her still damp hair, Delia made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon to the kitchen at the back of the house. Rosa was at the stove, humming as she flipped something in a cast-iron skillet. She turned at Delia's entrance, her face brightening. "Ah, good morning. You look much better today. Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," Delia admitted. "Thank you for the clothes." "Rebecca left many things behind. It is good they can be useful." Rosa gestured to the table already set for a meal. "Sit, sit. Breakfast is almost ready." Delia had just taken a seat when the back door opened and Nathaniel entered, now wearing a clean shirt, his hair damp as if he had just washed up after his morning chores. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver through Delia. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling shy in his presence by daylight. Yesterday, in the crisis of the moment, their interaction had been charged with urgency. Now, in the normalcy of morning, she wasn't quite sure how to behave. "Your wrists?" he inquired, taking a seat across from her. Delia extended her hands, showing the neat bandages Rosa had applied. "Much better, thanks to Rosa's care." Rosa brought plates of food to the table: fluffy scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, and what appeared to be fried cornmeal cakes drizzled with honey. "Eat," she commanded, pouring coffee for them both. "You are too thin, Nina." The meal passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Nathaniel asked general questions about Delia's life in Boston, careful to avoid the sensitive topic of how she had ended up in Jerome Junction. In turn, she learned that he had indeed been a Texas Ranger before coming to Arizona territory to establish his ranch. "What brought you so far from Texas?" she asked, curious about what would make a man leave his home for this wild frontier. A shadow passed over his face briefly. "After the war, Texas changed, or perhaps I did. Either way, I found myself wanting a fresh start somewhere new." "The war," Delia echoed. She had been just a child when the Civil War ended, but its aftermath had shaped the world she grew up in. "You fought with the Union," he confirmed. "Not a popular choice in Texas at the time, but my father came from Ireland to escape oppression. He couldn't abide the thought of his son fighting to preserve slavery." Delia nodded, a piece of the puzzle that was Nathaniel O'Rourke falling into place. "That explains why you—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Why I what?" he prompted. "Why you would help someone like me," she finished. "Someone being treated unjustly." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Justice matters to me, so does freedom." Rosa, who had been bustling around the kitchen during their conversation, approached the table with a basket of additional cornmeal cakes. "Senor Nate has always fought for those who cannot fight for themselves," she said proudly, "even when it costs him." Nathaniel looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise. "Rosa exaggerates. I simply do what any decent man would do." "If only that were true," Delia murmured, thinking of the men who had stood by or actively participated in her persecution. After breakfast, Nathaniel excused himself to attend to ranch business, but not before inviting Delia to explore the property as she wished. "Consider yourself a guest here, not a prisoner," he said. "Go wherever you like. Ask questions of anyone. No one will harm you while you're under my protection." Left to her own devices, Delia spent the morning exploring the ranch house. It was larger than it had appeared from outside, with several bedrooms upstairs, a study filled with books that made her heart leap with joy, and a parlor that looked barely used. Throughout, The Dacre reflected a blend of practical frontier living and unexpected refinements: fine wooden furniture, a piano in the parlor, shelves of leather-bound books, and carefully chosen artwork that suggested an educated taste. He had most of the furniture shipped from San Francisco, Rosa explained when she found Delia admiring a particularly beautiful writing desk in the study. Cost a fortune, but Senor Nate says good craftsmanship is worth the price. By midday, Delia had ventured outside, drawn by curiosity about the rest of the ranch. She walked through the yard, past the vegetable garden Rosa tended, toward the barn and corrals where several men were working with horses. They noticed her approach, tipping their hats respectfully but watching her with undisguised curiosity. Delia realized that word of her arrival must have spread among the ranch hands, though she wondered how much they knew about the circumstances. One of the men, older than the others with graying hair beneath his hat, approached her with a friendly smile. "Afternoon, madam. Jake Simmons, foreman of Diamond N. Boss said you might be wandering about today." "Delia Greene," she introduced herself. "I hope I'm not interfering with your work." "Not at all, madam. In fact, Boss said if you were interested, I should show you around, answer any questions you might have." Grateful for the offer, Delia spent the next hour touring the working parts of the ranch, learning about the cattle operation and horse breeding program that had made the Diamond N successful in just a few short years. Jake was respectful and informative, never once alluding to how or why she had come to be there, which confirmed her suspicion that Nathaniel had instructed his men accordingly. It was during this tour that she caught sight of Nathaniel again, this time in one of the larger corrals, working with a spirited black stallion. The horse was clearly resistant to being ridden, rearing and bucking as Nathaniel approached with a saddle. Instead of forcing the issue, however, he set the saddle aside and began speaking softly to the animal, gradually moving closer until he could stroke its neck. "That's Midnight," Jake explained, following her gaze. "Wild Mustang the boss has been gentling for weeks now. Most men would have broken him by force long ago, but not the boss. Says a horse that chooses to partner with you is worth 10 that are merely beaten into submission." Delia watched, fascinated, as Nathaniel continued his patient work with the stallion. There was something deeply compelling about the way he handled the powerful animal, firm but never cruel, respectful of its spirit even as he asserted his authority. "He's good with broken things," Jake added, his voice softer. "Animals, land, people too, sees the value in what others might discard." The words struck Delia with unexpected force. Was that how Nathaniel saw her? As something broken to be fixed? The thought both comforted and unsettled her. As the afternoon wore on, she thanked Jake for the tour and made her way back to the house, her mind full of new impressions. The ranch was clearly prosperous, the men who worked it loyal to their employer. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of Nathaniel's character in the well-maintained buildings, the healthy livestock, the respect his employees showed him. Yet questions remained. Why had he really rescued her? What were his plans regarding the Gibson gang he claimed to be tracking? And how long could she reasonably impose on his hospitality? That evening, after another delicious meal prepared by Rosa, Delia found herself alone with Nathaniel in his study. Rosa had retired to her quarters in a small dwelling adjacent to the main house, and the ranch hands were either in the bunkhouse or in town enjoying their Saturday night. "How are you finding the Diamond N?" Nathaniel asked, pouring 2 small glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He offered one to Delia, who hesitated before accepting it. "It's beautiful," she replied honestly. "You've built something impressive here." He smiled slightly, settling into a leather chair across from her. "It's been a labor of love." When I first saw this land, I knew it was where I wanted to put down roots. Jake told me about your horse breeding program. He seems to think it will make your fortune." "Jake is optimistic," Nathaniel replied with a soft laugh. "But yes, I believe there's a market for well-bred, properly trained horses in this territory. The army is always in need, and as more settlers arrive, demand will only increase." Delia sipped her drink cautiously, finding the whiskey smoother than she expected. "I'm surprised you left the Rangers for ranching. Enforcing the law has its rewards, but also its limitations." His expression grew thoughtful. "As a ranger, I could pursue criminals, bring them to justice, but I couldn't build anything lasting. Here, I'm creating something that might outlive me." "Yet you're still tracking outlaws," she observed. His eyes sharpened. "The Gibson gang has been raiding stagecoaches and settlements across 3 territories for over a year. They're not just thieves, they're killers who take pleasure in their work. The local law hasn't been able to stop them, and in some cases—" He paused, looking at her meaningfully. "In some cases, the local law is complicit," Delia finished for him, remembering all too well how quickly Sheriff Wilson had accepted the outlaws' version of events over her protestations of innocence. "Yes." Nathaniel took a sip of his whiskey. "I've been working with the territorial governor to gather evidence against both the gang and the corrupt officials who protect them. Your case is not the first where an innocent person was railroaded to cover their crimes." "And that's why you were at the auction," she said, pieces falling into place. "You knew I was innocent because it fit the pattern you'd seen before." He nodded, his expression darkening. "When I heard about your sentencing, the timing matched perfectly with the stage robbery I'd been investigating. It wasn't hard to figure out what had happened." Delia set her glass down, her hands suddenly unsteady. "What will happen now? To me, I mean." Nathaniel leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. "That depends on what you want, Delia. I have a friend in Prescott, a federal judge who isn't in Gibson's pocket. With my testimony and the evidence I've gathered, we could clear your name officially. And the men who did this to me. The gang, the sheriff, the judge who sentenced me. Justice takes time," he admitted. "But I won't stop until they answer for their crimes." Delia felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, hope, and something else she wasn't ready to name. "Why are you helping me, really?" He was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for the right words. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because when I saw you standing there, refusing to be broken despite everything they'd done to you, I couldn't walk away." There was something in his voice, a catch of emotion that suggested deeper feelings than mere civic duty. Delia felt a corresponding flutter in her chest but pushed it firmly aside. Her situation was too precarious, her future too uncertain, to indulge in such thoughts. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything you've done." Nathaniel nodded, seemingly understanding that she wasn't ready for more than that simple acknowledgement. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need, Delia. The choice is yours." As she prepared for bed that night, Delia found herself drawn once more to the window of her room. The moon had risen, casting silver light over the ranch, and in the distance, she could see a solitary figure standing on the porch of the main house. Nathaniel, looking out over his domain, a sentinel in the night. For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, Delia allowed herself to think beyond mere survival. Perhaps here, in this unexpected place with this unexpected man, she might find not just safety but a new beginning. Days turned to weeks at the Diamond and Ranch. Spring blossomed fully into early summer, bringing longer days and the occasional afternoon thunderstorm that transformed the landscape into a palette of vibrant wildflowers and fresh green growth. Delia found herself settling into a routine, helping Rosa with household tasks, reading voraciously from Nathaniel's extensive library, and even beginning to assist with the ranch's bookkeeping when Nathaniel discovered her facility with numbers. "You've done this before," he observed one afternoon as she efficiently organized a ledger that had become hopelessly muddled in his hands. "I was trained as a teacher, but my father was a banker," she explained. "He believed all his children should understand finance, even his daughters. It scandalized my mother's friends, but he was adamant." Nathaniel watched her work with undisguised admiration. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Delia said softly, a pang of grief touching her heart. "They both died in the influenza outbreak of '73. That's partly why I decided to come west. There was nothing holding me in Boston anymore." It was the first time she had voluntarily shared anything about her past beyond the most basic facts, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. Nathaniel said nothing, but his hand briefly covered hers on the ledger, a gesture of understanding that spoke more than words. As May turned to June, Delia became increasingly integrated into life at the ranch. The hands tipped their hats to her with genuine respect rather than mere courtesy. Rosa beamed with approval as Delia's cheeks filled out and color returned to her complexion. And even the wild Mustang, Midnight, had begun to accept sugar cubes from her hand under Nathaniel's watchful guidance. "He likes you," Nathaniel remarked as the stallion gently lipped a cube from Delia's palm. "He's a good judge of character." Delia stroked the horse's velvety muzzle, marveling at the trust the once wild animal now showed. "He's magnificent. Will you ride him when he's fully trained?" "That's the plan," Nathaniel replied. "Though I'm in no hurry, some things can't be rushed." His eyes met hers over the corral fence, and Delia felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Over the weeks, something had been growing between them, a connection that went beyond gratitude on her part or chivalry on his. They spoke easily now, sharing thoughts and ideas, discovering mutual interests in literature and music. Sometimes in the evenings, he would read aloud from one of his books while she worked on mending, his deep voice bringing the words to life in a way that made her heart ache with a sweet, unnamed longing. But neither of them had put words to the feeling, as if by naming it they might somehow break the fragile peace they had found. The idyll was interrupted one warm afternoon in late June when a rider came pounding up to the ranch house, his horse lathered with exertion. Delia was in the garden with Rosa, harvesting early vegetables when the commotion brought them both to their feet. "Senor Matthews," Rosa identified the rider, shading her eyes against the sun. "From the Circle M to the east, something must be wrong." They hurried to the yard where Nathaniel was already striding from the barn to meet the newcomer. The man, middle-aged with a weathered face creased with worry, dismounted hastily. "O'Rourke," he called, "we've got trouble. Gibson's men hit the overland stage this morning just east of the pass. 3 passengers dead, including a woman and her child." Delia felt her blood run cold at the mention of the outlaw's name. Nathaniel's expression hardened into a mask of controlled fury. "Any survivors?" he asked, his voice tight. Matthews nodded grimly. "The driver. He managed to get away on one of the horses and made it to my place. He's pretty badly shot up, but he's alive." "What's he saying?" "That he recognized 2 of them Jenkins and that half-breed scout they call Apache Joe. Said they were headed north with whatever they took from the passengers." Nathaniel's jaw worked as he processed this information. "Did you send word to the sheriff?" Matthews snorted derisively. "For all the good it'll do. Wilson said he'd look into it, but we both know that means exactly nothing." "The territorial marshals." "Nearest one's in Prescott, 3 days' ride away." Nathaniel turned slightly. suddenly aware of Delia standing nearby, her face pale. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Delia knew what he would do before he spoke. "I'm going after them," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Jake." He called to the foreman who had joined the gathering. "I need 5 men, the best riders with the steadiest gun hands. Tell them to be ready to ride in an hour." Jake nodded and hurried toward the bunkhouse. Matthews dismounted, relief evident on his face. "I figured you'd say that, O'Rourke." "Count me in. My boys are already saddling up." Delia stepped forward, her heart hammering. "Nathaniel, you can't. It's too dangerous. These men are killers." His expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "It's what I have to do, Delia. If not me, then who?" "Then take me with you," she said impulsively. "I can identify them. I saw their faces during the robbery." "Absolutely not," he replied firmly. "I'm not putting you in danger again. But Delia—" He stepped closer, lowering his voice for her ears alone. "I need you safe. Please understand that." The intensity in his eyes silenced her protests. She nodded reluctantly, fear clutching at her heart. "Just come back. Promise me you'll come back." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, tenderness, and determination. "I promise," he said softly, then turned back to the practical matters at hand. "Matthews, get your horse to the barn. Jose will see to it while you have something to eat. We'll ride as soon as my men are ready." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity as the ranch prepared for the pursuit party's departure. Weapons were checked, provisions packed, horses saddled. Delia moved through it all in a haze of anxiety, helping Rosa prepare food for the men to take with them, but unable to shake the dread that had settled over her. As the men mounted up, Nathaniel sought her out one last time. He had changed into darker clothing and strapped on a gun belt that somehow made him look different, harder, more dangerous. "I'll be back in a few days," he told her, his voice gentle despite his grim expression. "Jake is staying behind with enough men to keep the ranch safe. You have nothing to fear here." "It's not myself I'm afraid for," she admitted. He hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek lightly. "Have faith, Delia. This isn't my first hunt." Before she could respond, he swung into the saddle and called to his men. With a thunder of hooves, they rode out, dust rising behind them as they headed north toward the mountains. Delia watched until they disappeared from sight, Rosa's comforting arm around her shoulders. "Come," the older woman said at last. "There is nothing to do now but pray and wait." The waiting proved to be a special kind of torment. Days passed with agonizing slowness as Delia tried to maintain her usual routine while constantly watching the horizon for returning riders. Rosa, understanding her anxiety, kept her busy with tasks around the house. But nothing could fully distract her from her worry. On the evening of the 3rd day, a fierce thunderstorm swept across the ranch. Rain lashed at the windows as lightning split the sky and thunder shook the very foundations of the house. Delia paced restlessly in the parlor, unable to concentrate on her book, her thoughts with Nathaniel and his men out in the wild. "They will have found shelter," Rosa assured her, bringing a cup of hot tea. "Senor Nate knows this land like the back of his hand." "What if they found more than just shelter?" Delia couldn't help asking. "What if they found the Gibson gang?" Rosa crossed herself. "Then I pray the Virgin Mother watches over them. But Senor Nate is no fool. He will not take unnecessary risks." But both women knew that in pursuit of such dangerous men, all risks were necessary ones. The storm raged through the night, finally easing as dawn approached. Delia, who had slept fitfully at best, rose early and went to the window, searching the sodden landscape for any sign of movement. The ranch was quiet, the hands just beginning to emerge from the bunkhouse for their morning chores. She dressed quickly and went downstairs, determined to keep busy rather than succumb to her fears. Rosa was already in the kitchen, kneading dough for the day's bread with more vigor than usual, her own concern evident in the set of her shoulders. Just after midday, as Delia was helping to prepare the noon meal, a shout went up from one of the hands. "Riders coming! It's the boss!" Delia dropped the knife she was using and ran to the door, her heart in her throat. Through the clearing weather, she could see a group of riders approaching slowly, too slowly. As they drew nearer, she could make out Nathaniel in the lead, his posture rigid in the saddle. Behind him came the rest of his men, and in the middle of the group, 3 figures on horses with their hands bound. "They got them," Rosa breathed beside her. "Praise God." Delia felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by fresh concern as she noticed the makeshift bandage wrapped around Nathaniel's left arm, dark with what could only be blood. The party rode into the yard, mud splashing beneath the horses' hooves. Nathaniel dismounted stiffly, his face grim but triumphant as he issued orders to his men about securing their prisoners in the storage cellar, until the territorial marshal could be summoned from Prescott. Only when these immediate concerns were addressed did he turn toward the house, his eyes finding Delia where she stood on the porch. Something in his expression shifted, the hardness melting into something softer, more vulnerable. He crossed to her in a few long strides, stopping at the foot of the steps. "We got them," he said simply. "Not all of the gang, but the 3 worst Jenkins, Apache Joe, and Harlan Gibson himself." "You're hurt," Delia said, unable to take her eyes from the bloodied bandage. "It's nothing." "A bullet graze." He climbed the steps slowly, clearly more fatigued than he wanted to admit. "Gibson's a good shot, but not good enough." Without thinking, Delia reached for him, her hands catching his as if to reassure herself that he was really there, alive and whole despite his wound. "You promised you'd come back," she whispered, "and I keep my promises." His larger hands closed around hers, and for a long moment they stood like that, connected, the rest of the world falling away. The moment broke when Rosa appeared in the doorway, clucking with concern at the sight of Nathaniel's injury. "Inside now," she commanded. "That needs proper tending, and you need food and rest." The next hours were a flurry of activity as the prisoners were secured. The returning men fed and tended to, and a rider dispatched to Prescott with news of the captures. Delia insisted on helping Rosa clean and bandage Nathaniel's wound, which proved to be exactly as he described, a deep graze along his upper arm that would be painful but not life-threatening. "You were lucky," she told him as she carefully wrapped fresh bandages around the cleaned wound. "Skill, not luck," he replied with a hint of his usual humor, though his eyes were serious as they watched her work. "But yes, I'm grateful it wasn't worse." That evening, with the ranch finally settled and the prisoners under heavy guard, Nathaniel and Delia found themselves alone in his study once more. Outside, another storm was brewing, distant thunder rumbling across the darkening sky. "Tell me what happened," Delia requested softly, curled in what had become her usual chair. Nathaniel sighed, swirling the whiskey in his glass before responding. "We tracked them north into the mountains. The storm slowed them down enough for us to catch up." He paused, his expression hardening. "They didn't surrender easily. 2 of my men were wounded, nothing serious, and Matthews took a bullet in the leg. He'll be laid up for a while, but he'll heal. And the outlaws. 1 dead, a new member of the gang I didn't recognize. The other 3 surrendered when they saw their odds. Gibson tried to negotiate, offered me money to let them go." His lip curled slightly in disgust, as if any amount would be enough to buy off justice for what they've done. Delia studied his face, seeing the weight of the past days etched in new lines around his eyes. "What will happen to them now?" The marshal will take them to Prescott to stand trial. With the evidence I've collected and the testimony of the stage driver, they'll hang." He said it matter-of-factly, without relish but without regret. "And with Gibson in custody, we can start building a case against Sheriff Wilson and Judge Holbrook. Their days of corruption are numbered." "And me?" Delia asked, the question that had been hovering in her mind finally finding voice. "What happens to me now?" Nathaniel set his glass down, his full attention on her. "That's for you to decide, Delia. Your name will be cleared, your freedom officially restored. After that, you can go wherever you wish, do whatever you choose." The thought should have brought nothing but relief. Instead, Delia felt a strange hollowness at the prospect of leaving the Diamond Inn, leaving Nathaniel. Over these weeks, this place had become more than a refuge, it had become something dangerously close to home. "And if I wished to stay?" The words escaped before she could reconsider them, hanging in the air between them. Nathaniel went very still, his blue eyes darkening with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Are you saying you want to stay, Delia?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm saying that I've found something here I never expected to find. Peace, purpose." She hesitated, then added softly, "Connection." He rose from his chair and moved to kneel before hers, taking her hands in his larger ones. "Delia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would be honored if you chose to stay. But I need to be sure it's truly what you want, not what you think you owe me or what you fear awaits you elsewhere." "It's not gratitude," she assured him, her heart pounding, "or fear. It's—" She struggled to find the right words. "When I'm with you, I feel like myself again. More than that, I feel like the self I was always meant to be." His hands tightened on hers. "From the moment I saw you on that auction block, so defiant despite everything they'd done to you, something in me recognized something in you. As if some part of me had been waiting for you without even knowing it." Thunder crashed outside, closer now, as rain began to patter against the windows. In the flickering lamplight, Nathaniel's face was a study in vulnerability and hope. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Delia Greene," he said simply. "I've tried to fight it, tried to give you space and time to heal, but I can't deny it any longer. If you stay, I want you to know exactly what I'm offering, not just a home or a position, but my heart." Delia felt tears well in her eyes, tears of joy and wonder rather than sorrow. "And I think I've already fallen in love with you, Nathaniel O'Rourke. Against all reason, despite all caution, my heart has made its choice." With infinite tenderness, he raised one hand to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice a whisper. In answer, Delia leaned forward, meeting him halfway as his lips found hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more needful. His arms encircled her, mindful of his injured one, drawing her closer as the storm outside mirrored the one breaking within them, years of loneliness, and waiting finally giving way to the promise of something new and beautiful. When they finally parted, both breathless, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he murmured, "not just for now, but for always." "Yes," Delia whispered back, her heart too full for more elaborate declarations. "Always." The journey to Prescott the following week marked the first time Delia had left the safety of the ranch since her arrival. She sat beside Nathaniel in the wagon, Rosa behind them, as they followed the road through increasingly mountainous terrain toward the territorial capital. "Nervous?" Nathaniel asked, noting her pensive expression as they crested a hill that offered a view of the settlement in the distance. "A little," she admitted. "The last time I was in a town, things didn't go well for me." His hand found hers, squeezing reassuringly. "This time is different. Judge Harmon is a good man, fair and honest. He's reviewed all the evidence I've gathered, including sworn statements from Matthews and the stage driver. Your name will be officially cleared." Delia nodded, taking comfort in his confidence. The past week had been a whirlwind of emotions as they adjusted to their new understanding. Nothing had fundamentally changed in their daily interactions. They still worked together, talked together, respected each other's space, but everything was also different, infused with a new awareness of what they meant to each other. Nathaniel had been the epitome of a gentleman, never presuming more than Delia was ready to give. Their kisses had grown more passionate, their embraces longer, but he had made it clear that the pace of their relationship would be entirely her choice. "We have time," he had told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "All the time we need." Prescott proved to be a bustling town, more developed than Jerome Junction, with substantial buildings of brick and stone along its main streets. The courthouse stood at the center, an imposing structure that made Delia's stomach clench with memories of her last experience with frontier justice. Judge Harmon, however, was nothing like the corrupt official who had sentenced her to servitude. Gray-haired and dignified, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, he welcomed them into his chambers with genuine warmth. "Mr. O'Rourke," he greeted, shaking Nathaniel's hand firmly. "And this must be Miss Greene. Please be seated." The proceedings were brief but thorough. The judge reviewed the documentation Nathaniel had provided, asked Delia several questions about her experience, and then nodded decisively. "The evidence is clear," he announced. "Miss Greene, you were the victim of a grave miscarriage of justice. I hereby declare all charges against you null and void, your record expunged." He stamped an official document and handed it to her. "This certifies your innocence and restored rights as a citizen of the United States." Delia accepted the paper with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the finality of it. After months of fear and uncertainty, her ordeal was officially over. "Thank you, Your Honor," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. The judge turned his attention to the other matter at hand. "As for the Gibson gang, they will stand trial next week. Given the evidence and witness testimonies, I anticipate convictions on all counts." "And Sheriff Wilson?" Nathaniel asked. "Judge Holbrook." Judge Harmon's expression grew grimmer. "The territorial governor has authorized a full investigation based on your evidence. U.S. Marshals arrested Wilson yesterday. Holbrook has fled, but they'll find him. The days of such corruption in this territory are numbered, thanks in no small part to your persistence, O'Rourke." After concluding their business at the courthouse, Nathaniel surprised Delia by suggesting they remain in Prescott overnight. "There are some things we need that can't be found in Jerome Junction," he explained cryptically. "And I've arranged for rooms at the Palace Hotel, the finest in town." Delia looked at him suspiciously. "What things?" His smile was enigmatic. "You'll see." The Palace Hotel was indeed impressive, its lobby gleaming with polished wood and brass fixtures. After securing their rooms, two adjoining for propriety's sake, with rosas across the hall, Nathaniel led Delia to the town's main street, lined with shops of every description. "First stop," he announced, stopping before a dressmaker's establishment with elegant gowns displayed in the window. "You've been making do with Rebecca's old things for too long. It's time you had clothes of your own." "Nathaniel," Delia protested, "this isn't necessary. I'm perfectly comfortable with what I have." "Perhaps, but I want to give you this, please." His expression was so earnest that Delia couldn't refuse. The next hours were a whirlwind of activity as she was measured and fitted for several new dresses, petticoats, a coat for the coming winter, and a hat that the dressmaker assured her was the latest fashion. Nathaniel paid for everything without batting an eye, despite Delia's attempts to be reasonable in her selections. "Next," he declared when they left the dressmakers with promises that everything would be delivered to the Diamond Inn within 2 weeks. "There's more?" Delia asked, both embarrassed and secretly delighted by his generosity. Their next stop was a bookshop where Nathaniel encouraged her to select whatever titles caught her interest. "The ranch's library needs a woman's perspective," he insisted. "It's too heavily weighted toward history and adventure." By the time they added a jeweler's shop, where he purchased a delicate silver bracelet that he clasped around her wrist, despite her protests, and a confectioner's, where he indulged her sweet tooth with chocolates imported from San Francisco, Delia was both overwhelmed and deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked as they sat at a small cafe for a late lunch, parcels piled beside them. Nathaniel looked at her with tender seriousness. "Because you deserve beautiful things, Delia. Because I want to see you smile. And because I can, so why shouldn't I?" That evening, dressed in one ready-made dress the shop had been able to provide immediately, a lovely creation of deep blue silk that brought out the color of her eyes, Delia joined Nathaniel for dinner in the hotel's elegant dining room. Rosa had begged off, claiming fatigue from the journey, though her knowing smile suggested she understood the couple might want time alone. Delia couldn't help but notice the admiring glances Nathaniel received from other women in the room, and the corresponding looks of envy directed at her. He cut a striking figure in his best suit, his normally unruly hair tamed for the evening, his blue eyes bright with pleasure as he gazed at her across the table. "You look beautiful," he told her, not for the first time that evening. "That color suits you." Delia blushed, still unaccustomed to such open admiration. "Thank you for everything today. It was overwhelming, in a good way, I hope." There was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "In the best way," she assured him. "Though I'm not sure what I've done to deserve such generosity." "You exist," he said simply. "That's enough." The meal was the finest Delia had eaten since leaving Boston. Tender steaks, fresh vegetables prepared with European flair, and a chocolate dessert that melted on her tongue. They talked easily throughout, sharing observations about the town, discussing their purchases, carefully avoiding the heavier topics that had dominated their recent days. After dinner, they walked through the hotel's small garden, illuminated by paper lanterns strung among the trees. The evening was warm, stars emerging in the darkening sky above the mountains that cradled the town. "I have one more gift for you," Nathaniel said as they paused beside a small fountain, "if you'll accept it." "Nathaniel, really? You've given me far too much already," Delia began, but stopped short when he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Her heart began to race as he opened it to reveal a ring, a delicate band of gold supporting a perfect diamond that caught the lantern light and scattered it in tiny rainbows. "I know it's soon," he said, his voice suddenly husky with emotion. "Perhaps too soon by conventional standards. But nothing about our meeting or our relationship has been conventional." He took her hand in his eyes never leaving hers. "Delia Greene, I love you. I want to build a life with you, to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Delia's eyes, blurring her vision but not dimming the love she saw in his face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nathaniel O'Rourke, I will marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into an embrace that conveyed all the passion and tenderness they had been restraining in public. His lips found hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of such moments, sweet and fierce, and entirely theirs. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing softly with joy, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked simply. "Soon," Delia replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "I don't want to wait." His smile was brilliant in the lantern light. "Neither do I." They decided, there in the garden with the fountain's gentle music surrounding them, to marry as soon as they returned to the Diamond Inn. No elaborate preparations, no lengthy engagement, just a simple ceremony with Rosa, the ranch hands, and perhaps a few neighbors as witnesses. "Are you sure?" Nathaniel asked as they walked back toward their rooms, her hand firmly clasped in his. "We could wait, have a proper wedding in Prescott with all the trimmings." Delia shook her head. "I don't need trimmings, I just need you and our home." At her door he kissed her once more, lingering as if reluctant to say good night. "2 more days," he murmured against her lips. "2 days until we're home, and then I'll make you my wife." "2 days," she echoed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I'll be counting every minute." The return journey to the Diamond Inn seemed to take both forever and no time at all, the landscape rolling past in a blur as Delia's thoughts alternated between nervous anticipation and serene certainty. Rosa, when told of their plans, had been delighted, immediately beginning to plan the wedding feast and insisting that they must at least wait until she could prepare everything properly. 3 days, she declared firmly. "I need 3 days to make it perfect." Nathaniel had agreed, laughing at the older woman's enthusiasm. "3 days it is. I suppose I can wait that long to make Miss Greene my wife." Word spread quickly around the ranch upon their return. The hands, who had come to respect and like Delia during her stay, responded with genuine pleasure to the news. Jake Simmons, the foreman, went so far as to present her with a hand-carved wooden box he had been working on in his spare time. "Was going to give it to you for your birthday, whenever that might be," he explained gruffly. "But a wedding gift seems right too." Preparations for the ceremony occupied the entire ranch for the next 3 days. Rosa directed operations with military precision. The house was cleaned from top to bottom. Flowering branches were gathered from the creek to decorate the parlor, and cooking began in earnest for what promised to be a feast to remember. Nathaniel rode to Jerome Junction and returned with the local preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Taylor, who would perform the ceremony. He also brought a telegram from Prescott News that the Gibson gang had been convicted on all counts, with sentencing scheduled for the following week. "It's truly over," Delia said when he shared the news. "They can't hurt anyone else." "Justice is served," Nathaniel agreed, drawing her into his arms. "Now we can focus on our future." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, the early summer heat tempered by a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers and sage. Delia woke early, too excited to sleep, and stood at her window watching the sun rise over the mountains, the last sunrise she would witness as Delia Greene. Rosa arrived shortly after with a breakfast tray and brisk instructions. "Eat, then bath. I have prepared special oils for your hair. Today, you will be the most beautiful bride this territory has ever seen." Under the older woman's loving care, Delia was transformed. Her hair was washed and styled in an elegant arrangement of curls, adorned with small white flowers from Rosa's garden. The blue silk dress from Prescott would serve as her wedding gown, complemented by the silver bracelet Nathaniel had given her, and a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to Rosa's mother, something borrowed. "For luck," Rosa explained as she fastened them to Delia's ears. As noon approached the time set for the ceremony, Delia felt a curious calm settle over her. All doubts, all fears had vanished, leaving only the certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, about to commit her life to the man she loved beyond reason or explanation. A knock at the door revealed Jake Simmons, uncharacteristically clean-shaven and dressed in his Sunday best. "Boss asked if I'd do the honor of escorting you downstairs, madam," he said, a touch of pink appearing above his collar. "I would be honored, Mr. Simmons," Delia replied with a warm smile. Downstairs, the parlor had been transformed. Flowers adorned every surface, their fragrance filling the air. The ranch hands stood along the walls in freshly pressed shirts, hair slicked down with water. Neighbors from surrounding ranches filled the remaining space, curiosity and goodwill evident in their faces. And at the far end of the room, beside Reverend Taylor, stood Nathaniel. He wore a new black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. But it was his expression that took Delia's breath away, a look of such naked love and wonder that she felt tears prick her eyes. As Jake led her through the assembled guests, Delia was conscious only of Nathaniel's eyes on her, drawing her forward as surely as if he held her hand. When they reached him and Jake solemnly placed her hand in his, the contact sent a current of emotion through her so powerful she nearly gasped. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Taylor began, his voice filling the hushed room, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony passed in a blur for Delia, her focus entirely on Nathaniel's face, his hands holding hers, the depth of feeling in his voice as he repeated his vows. When the time came for her to speak, she was surprised by the steadiness of her own voice, clear and certain as she promised to love, honor, and cherish him for all the days of her life. "The ring," prompted Reverend Taylor, and Nathaniel produced a second band of gold, simpler than her engagement ring but no less meaningful as he slipped it onto her finger. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "By the power vested in me," the Reverend concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled benevolently at the couple. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. O'Rourke." Nathaniel needed no further invitation. His hands cradled Delia's face with infinite tenderness, as his lips met hers in a kiss that was both a promise and a fulfillment. The room erupted in cheers and applause, but Delia was aware only of her husband, and the love that surrounded them like a tangible force. "Mrs. O'Rourke," he whispered against her lips when they finally parted. "My wife." "My husband," she replied, tasting the word and finding it perfect. The celebration that followed was joyous and prolonged. Rosa's feast proved to be everything she had promised: succulent roast beef, tender vegetables from her garden, fresh baked breads, and a wedding cake that drew gasps of admiration from the assembled guests. Wine flowed freely, toasts were offered, and as the afternoon stretched into evening, someone produced a fiddle and accordion, transforming the yard into an impromptu dance floor. Nathaniel led Delia in the first dance, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a powerful man. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, delighted, as he guided her through the steps. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a smile. "Said no O'Rourke would shame her by clomping around a dance floor like a draft horse." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in spectacular hues of orange and pink, guests began to depart with final congratulations and knowing smiles. Rosa shooed the remaining ranch hands toward the bunkhouse, declaring the celebrations officially concluded. "Go now," she instructed the newlyweds with maternal authority. "Be happy together." Nathaniel took Delia's hand and led her back to the house, their house now, truly hers as much as his. In preparation for their marriage, he had moved his personal belongings to the master bedroom, a spacious chamber at the end of the upstairs hallway that Delia had never entered before. He paused outside the door, his expression suddenly serious. "Delia," he began, then hesitated. "I want you to know that I expect nothing you're not ready to give. We can wait. If you need more time," she silenced him with a finger against his lips, her heart swelling with love for this man who always put her well-being first. "I don't need more time," she said softly. "I need you." Relief and desire mingled in his eyes as he bent to sweep her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold in the age-old tradition. Inside, the room was lit only by moonlight streaming through the windows and the soft glow of a single lamp on the bedside table. Fresh flowers had been placed in vases Rosa's doing, Delia suspected, and the bed was turned down invitingly, covered with a handmade quilt in shades of blue and cream. Nathaniel set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "You are so beautiful," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sometimes I still can't believe you're real, that you're here with me." "I'm real," she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "And I'm yours, Nathaniel, as you are mine." His kiss was different this time, deeper, hungrier, less restrained than those that had come before. Delia responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed herself against him, feeling the solid strength of his body against hers. With gentle hands, he helped her remove the flowers from her hair, then the pins that held it in its elaborate arrangement, until it tumbled freely down her back. His fingers combed through the waves, his expression one of wonder. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you," he admitted. The rest of their clothing followed, removed piece by piece with reverent hands and whispered words of admiration. When they finally came together on the bed, skin against skin, Nathaniel paused, his eyes seeking hers in the dim light. "I love you," he said simply, the words holding all the promise of the life they would build together. "I love you," Delia echoed, drawing him down to her. All uncertainty replaced by the surety of their connection. In the hours that followed, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their bodies joining as their hearts had already done. Nathaniel was gentle yet passionate, patient yet ardent, his every touch designed to bring her pleasure before seeking his own. When they finally lay quiet in each other's arms, the moon high overhead casting silver light across the bed, Delia felt a peace and completion she had never known was possible. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Delia smiled against his chest. "I was thinking about chains," he stilled, clearly surprised by her answer. "Chains?" "Yes." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at his face. "How strange it is that my worst day being auctioned in chains like an animal led me to my best day. To you." His expression softened with understanding, from captivity to freedom in one moment. "In one moment," she agreed, remembering the instant when he had broken those chains and carried her away. Sometimes the worst endings are really beginnings in disguise. Nathaniel drew her back into his arms, holding her as if she were infinitely precious. "This is just our beginning, Delia O'Rourke, the first page of a very long story." "Tell me about this story," she murmured, nestling against him. "What happens next?" "Well," he began, his voice a comforting rumble beneath her ear, "there's this ranch that grows more prosperous each year. Maybe it expands, adds more cattle, breeds more horses. The house fills with books and music and laughter. And children." Delia asked softly, her heart catching at the thought. His arms tightened around her. "Yes, children, with your spirit and perhaps my stubbornness. Boys who will learn to ride almost before they can walk, girls who will wrap me around their little fingers." The image was so vivid, so desirable that Delia felt tears sting her eyes. "I would like that," she whispered. "Very much." "Then it shall be so," he declared, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "All of it, exactly as we wish it to be." In the years that followed, the story of the Diamond N Ranch and its owners became something of a legend in the Arizona Territory. How Nathaniel O'Rourke, former Texas Ranger turned successful rancher, had rescued the woman who would become his wife from an unjust sentence. How they had together brought down the notorious Gibson gang and exposed corruption among local officials. How their ranch prospered and grew, becoming one of the most respected in the territory. But those were just the facts, the outward details visible to all. The true story, the one that mattered, was known only to those who lived it. The love that had bloomed against all odds, the family they created together, the life they built day by day with patience and determination. 2 years after their wedding, Delia gave birth to their first child, a son they named James, after Nathaniel's father. He was followed 18 months later by a daughter, Sarah, who indeed had her father wrapped around her little finger from the moment she drew her first breath. 2 more children completed their family over the next few years, another son, William, and a second daughter, Elizabeth. The Diamond N expanded as Nathaniel had predicted, adding acreage and cattle, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses. Delia, drawing on her teaching experience, established a small school for the children of the ranch hands and neighboring properties, ensuring that education reached even this remote corner of the frontier. Rosa remained with them, becoming grandmother to their children in all but blood. Jake Simmons continued as foreman, turning down offers from larger ranches to stay with the family he had come to consider his own. And Midnight, the once wild stallion, became Nathaniel's favored mount, their partnership a living example of the ranch's philosophy that respect and patience yielded better results than force and dominance. As for the chains that had once bound Delia, they were kept in a small wooden box, the very one Jake had carved as a wedding gift, on a shelf in Nathaniel's study. Not as a reminder of captivity, but as a testament to freedom and the unexpected ways in which fate could turn suffering into joy. "Why do you keep those?" young James asked one day when he discovered the box during a game of hide and seek. "They look scary." Nathaniel exchanged a glance with Delia, who had entered the study in search of their son. "They remind us of something important," he explained, lifting his boy onto his lap. "That's sometimes when things seem darkest, that's when the best parts of our story are about to begin." "Like in Mama's books?" the child asked, his innocent curiosity bringing smiles to both his parents' faces. "Exactly like that," Delia confirmed, moving to stand beside her husband's chair, her hand finding its customary place on his shoulder. "The scariest chapter is often followed by the happiest ending." "Is your story happy now?" James wanted to know. Nathaniel looked up at Delia, his blue eyes still holding the same love and wonder they had when he first carried her away from Jerome Junction all those years ago. "The happiest," they answered in unison, their voices blending perfectly like their lives, their hearts, their shared destiny on this wild frontier they called home.